Okay, first song today, let's do 118, 118. Count your blessings. Let's do all four verses. When upon life's billows you are tempted, tossed, when you are discouraged, thinking all is lost, count your many blessings, name them one by one, and it will surprise you what the Lord hath done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God hath done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your many blessings, see what God hath done. Are you ever burdened with a load of care? Does the cross seem heavy you are called to bear? Count your many blessings, every doubt will fly, and you will be singing as the days go by. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God hath done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your many blessings, see what God hath done. When you look at others with their lands and gold, think that Christ has promised you his wealth untold. Count your many blessings, money cannot buy. Your reward in heaven, all your home on high. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God hath done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your many blessings, see what God hath done. So amid the conflict, whether great or small, do not be discouraged, God is over all. Count your many blessings, angels will attend. Help and comfort give you to your journey's end. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God hath done. Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your many blessings, see what God hath done. Okay, before class, let's do number 242. 242. How beautiful heaven must be. We read of a place that's called heaven. It's made for the pure and the free. These truths in God's word he has given. How beautiful heaven must be. How beautiful heaven must be. In heaven no drooping nor pining, no wishing or elsewhere to be. God's light is forever there shining. How beautiful heaven must be. How beautiful heaven must be. Sweet home of the happy and free. Fair haven of rest for the weary. How beautiful heaven must be. Invitation will be 368. 368.
All right. We started this discussion of Colossians 2 last week, and I don't want to belabor it, but we'll probably have another lesson, maybe two on this, and then I want to switch to another subject for a little while. I'm still trying to set the parameters exactly of it, but what I originally had in mind to study was some passages in the New Testament that that you somewhat need an Old Testament reference to understand. So like some of the passages in Hebrews that talk about different aspects of the law of Moses. You don't have to know all the law of Moses and all that, but you have to know something about what's being discussed to know the point he's making in the book of Hebrews. And then there are lots of different prophecies. There are dozens and dozens of Old Testament allusions or references. Now, the truth is, you don't have to know all about the Old Testament to understand the New. But some passages are elucidated by this. So I'm going to do a class on that. And we're going to look at New Testament scriptures and then explain the connection to something from the Old and explain what that's about. And I don't know how long it'll last. Hopefully not too much. I'll try not to belabor that too much, but it's a huge subject, so I'm trying to whittle it down a little bit. But anyway, let's turn our attention to Colossians 2. And I brought this up. This came to mind here because, as I mentioned last week, of this being Lent, then there's a lot of talk here and there, references that are made to people giving up this for Lent or doing this for Lent, doing this kind of thing, and then some of the different rituals that the Catholic Church and other churches practice around this time. This is, as they say, Holy Week. So you have different names for each day of the week. And I forgot what the Wednesday is. But you have Mardi Gras, which is Happy Tuesday, basically. Mardi Gras is a Catholic holiday. Now, this tells you something. This tells you something about tradition, and I don't mean to say this too negatively, but about the Catholic Church, that Mardi Gras to us means a wild party, because it means Happy or Joyful Tuesday. And that's because the day before you start going to the sad part of the week, Maundy, Thursday, and whatever, this is another name for Sad Wednesday, and Thursday, and then you've got to have a happy day. You've got to have a party day. So that's what this is about. So anyway, I got to thinking about that, and this passage comes to mind. Now I'm going to make another application of this in either this lesson or the next one about it, which maybe you'll find interesting, because this is a common, in Colossians here, in this book, we're going to read the verses in chapter 2 in just a moment. But he was addressing both Jew and Gentile with this problem. This is not a Jewish problem, and it's not a Gentile problem. It's a human problem of how we approach being good or being religious or whatever the case may be. It's a human problem. And the Gentiles had their way, and they still have their way, and religious people had their other way, and that's still, and what we're seeing But we're seeing, I read an article today by a more or less secular writer, and he said in the 60s, the hippie generation came up with a revolution against rules and regulations of the previous generation, and they overthrew the establishment and gave us all this freedom of sex, freedom of speech, and all these things, break free from all the rules. And now that has run its course, and what happens when those people who do that revolution, when they get in power, what do? Well, they establish new rules and regulations. That's why you have that song, Meet the New Boss. What about the new boss? You know the rock and roll song by Same as the Old Boss. Isn't that yeah, it's the one with the guy with the machine, the blind pinball wizard. Who? Meet the new boss, same as the old boss. So that generation of hippies, they ran their course. They're in charge of everything, and then another generation comes along in the 2010s, starting there, Obama's bunch. What did they do? They established a whole nother set of rules that are very much like the old rules. You can't have sex until you get permission for this and this and this and this. You can't have consent. You have all the rules about everything. So we've been living for the last 15 years under a new set of rules that are at least as strict as the World War II generation made. At least as strict. They're just secular rules. One was religious, and now these are secular rules about what you can call people, what you can't call people, what you can do. And now what's happening, they're seeing the last couple of years, is a big rebellion against that. A big revolt against those rules. And I say, great. Let's get a new boss. And guess what that new boss will be once he gets in charge long enough? Same as the old boss, because we're human beings. And that's how it works. This is what this is about. And so both Jews and Gentiles took dogmatism, which is making rules and regulations, to the wrong places. So let's read some of this. Colossians 2:20. Does what I just said make any sense? You all look like it made no sense whatsoever. Does it make any sense? What's that? You've never heard of the song. He's a pinball wizard.
Well, I've heard that.
You never heard of the pinball wizard?
Yeah.
Seen the play.
What's that?
Seen the play too.
You've seen the play? I've never seen the play. See, Larry's even more of a hippie than I am.
They heard the song, but they didn't listen to the words or try to figure out.
Everybody listens to words, they just don't admit it. Judy tells me she doesn't listen to words, but I say, you think it might be dirty, so you just won't admit it. I admit it, and I'll tell you what it is. Okay? But anyway, everybody listen. But I don't even know if I heard you correctly, Gary. What did you say? Maybe I didn't hear you correctly.
Basically, you don't hear the words in that you understand their meaning. You hear the words, but the rhythm of the song is what's left in your mind. That's what happens.
We won't get fooled again by the Who. That's the name of the song. We won't get fooled again.
That I recognize.
There you go. And I might be the pin, it's on the, there's a long version, I think, that runs right into the Pinball Wizard, or the Pinball Wizard runs into that. I never liked the Who, but that's who it is. You all know the Pinball Wizard song? He's a pinball wizard. Tommy, I think his name was. You don't know that song? Blind, deaf, and dumb.
Sure plays a mean.
But he sure plays a mean pinball.
That was the play, Tommy.
Tommy. Then play Tommy. Yeah, there you go. Rita, you got to get with the program here.
I don't know any of those.
You know any of that stuff? Okay. There's not a Dominican version of Tommy and the Pinball Wizard? Okay.
We have, these songs have meanings.
You have meanings to your songs.
It was a story.
That song has a meaning. It's a ballad. It's an opera. Tommy is an opera. I think it's trash, but it is an opera. A lot of operas are trash. Anyway. But anyway, the point is, the reason they say that, meet the new boss. Oh, yay, we got a new boss. Guess what? Same as the old boss. That's what you find in life. Okay. Kids are all happy they're going to get a new principal in school. Well, we'll see how that new principal is going to be. It's going to be just like the old principal. He's just going to have different favorite kids. He's going to have favorite kids that won't be able to get in trouble. They're just going to be different than the ones that old principal had, but he's going to have favorite kids. All right. Therefore, Colossians 2:20, if you died with Christ from the basic principles of the world, why, as though living in the world, do you subject yourself to regulations? Do not touch, do not taste, do not handle. Now, this is the King James, New King James Version. Which all concern things which perish with the using, according to the commandments and doctrines of men. These things indeed have an appearance of wisdom in self-imposed religion, false humility, and neglect of the body, but are of no value against the indulgence of the flesh. Now, the American Standard is a little bit different. It talks about the rudiments of the world. Why do you subject yourself to ordinances, it says? Handle not, nor taste, nor touch. Now, the point is, last week, when I was a kid, I would read this, a young person, I'd say, well, it sounds to me like this makes no sense to me, because aren't you trying to tell me as a young Christian man, don't handle it, don't taste it, or touch it? Aren't you telling me that's what the Bible says? Don't handle it, don't taste it, don't touch it? Yeah, you were. What's the difference here? Why does he say you shouldn't pay attention to ordinances about handling, tasting, or touching? Why is he saying that? Because they're not God-given ordinances. That's why. These are man-made ordinances. When God says don't touch it, taste it, or handle it, you better pay attention to that. When man says it, that's up to you. He says because these things are after the precepts and doctrines of men, and they look wise, but they have no value to you in accomplishing the goal of fighting the flesh. So I made a chart. See, the idea of ordinances is that if you will pay attention to these rules, the idea of a rule is a religious rule, or even here's the thing I was trying to say before. The politically correct rules that our society's been struggling under for 10 or 15 years now, maybe longer, are a religion. They are religious rules about the interaction of males and females and what you can call each other, and all those. They are ordinances. Someone told me the other day, Judy's great-grandfather and grandmother called each other Mr. and Mrs. Millen in public. They never would ever use each other's first name in public. It was disrespectful to them to use the other person's first name. Or he'd call her Sister Millen. Is that completely crazy? Well, there's a reason for it. Is it a religious rule? Well, it is a proper social rule that was made to accomplish a certain purpose and all that. Do they have a right to bind that? Well, let me tell you, my mother and dad bound whether I could call somebody Joe or Uncle Joe. I better not be caught calling any adult by their first name, ever. Am I wrong here? No. That's aunt and uncle or Mr. or Mrs. or something. It's not Gary. So when I hear the little kids call him Gary or me Mike, to me, that's perfectly acceptable today. And I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying, to me, it's like, because I'm not just Mike, I'm Mr. Mike. Or Uncle Mike or something. Because why? Because I'm an adult and they should respect me. My cousins, I've told you before, my cousins who were not really raised religious at all, they would refer to their father as the old man. And they'd say it kind of in his presence about the old man. I would, yeah, one time. If I ever thought I'd call my dad the old man. If my dad heard me tell my cousin, well, the old man says I can't go. Or old man won't let. Oh, my goodness. I hate to think what would happen to me. To show that kind of disrespect to my dad.
I guess it's different in Oklahoma because we just call
But in the South, and I don't think Oklahoma is in the South, it's more the West. I may be wrong about that, but I'm going by customs now, not geography. In the South, a generation ago or so, everybody called each other aunt and uncle at church, or grandma so-and-so, even if you weren't related. And if they were an older cousin, you called them cousin somebody. Usually. I have a hard time. Now my college professors are 80 years old, well over 80 years old, and I'm 70 years old, or not, and they're in the early 90s, I should say, and I'm 70. And I still can't call him Melvin. I have to call him Mr. Curry. And he'll look at me, smile, and I say, okay, Melvin, but I can't hardly do it. He's Mr. Curry to me because he was my teacher and professor. That doesn't make any sense, does it? Anyway, point being, everybody has rules. We like to think we don't follow rules, but every culture has societal regulations. And a lot of them are religious in the sense that they're kept as a religion. All this politically correct stuff and all of the pronoun stuff is a religion. And it's enforced like a religion, and it means the same thing to those people as your religious rules do about how they should deal with one another, because they've made ordinances about it. Do not taste, do not touch, do not handle. But he says if you died with Christ, and that means since you died with Christ, it's not an if there, you're a Christian. If you've died with Christ, or since you died with Christ, from these basic principles of the world, these things that just the world does, why do you subject yourselves to regulations or ordinances? As though you're living in the world. Why do you do this? And he lists them then: do not touch, do not taste, do not handle. You say, I've got them off to the side. Then he says, then a line goes from regulations down to the next group. He describes two things about them, which all concern things which perish with the using, according to the commandments and doctrines of men. Now notice I have a line drawn from Christ at the top down to men. That's the contrast between the regulations he's talking about. You've died with Christ, you're supposed to be subservient to him. Why are you still following the regulations of people, of human beings? Why does it concern you so much? These things, these regulations, indeed have an appearance of wisdom in three ways: in self-imposed religion, in false humility, and neglect of the body. They look wise. They have an appearance of wisdom. They look like they're very smart in three ways: in self-imposed religion, that is, you made up your own rules, so you're smart and you can take pride. You made up your own little rules about everything. And if you were to get involved in the reasons behind Catholic traditions, you'd probably be impressed with how much thought went into all those regulations and traditions. They seem to you like they don't mean much, but if you go back and look at how they came about and why they're doing those things, there's a lot of thought behind those things. The problem is, Christ doesn't command any of that stuff. But it's not, and but they look wise. And there's a false humility. I don't eat certain foods. I don't go certain places. You know? I wear a suit and tie. Therefore, I look humble. I wear special clothes that show that I'm a really set-apart priest, or whatever the case may be, a nun or something. And the neglect of the body. Look at that person. They must be really holy because they fast 3 times a week. And Jesus talked about those people that fasted all the time. Look what they're doing. They must be really holy. That person won't eat any gluten at all. It's amazing. They really are dedicated to their religion. And it's a religion. Certain types of vegetarianism in a broad sense is religious. It can't. Why is vegetarianism popular in the United States? Why? When did vegetarianism become popular in the United States? I've been alive long enough to tell you, when the Beatles became Buddhists and Hindus. That's when it became popular, because it's a religious way of eating. vegetarianism is. Now, I know some people don't like to eat meat for this, that, and the other, but it all filters down to the bottom, and it seems like, but essentially, vegetarianism, for most part in human cultures, is religious in its origins. Now, it may not be why you do it, or why somebody you know does it, but that's the way it is. And so, it's neglect of the body. And it's to some people, the more they have to say no, the holier they feel. We're going to come to that. Their religion is based on saying no. And that's why some of your parents were so hard on you. Because they wanted to be religious and wanted you to be religious, and so they said no most of the time. To whatever it might be. We pretty much knew for most things the answer was no. With my brothers. The answer is no. Now how can we move them off no? We know what the answer is. Now how can we fix that? You don't have parents like that? You did, yeah. Huh? Well, that's what we did. We just didn't ask. Yeah. Or we got my little brother to ask, because we told him they wouldn't yell at him, huh? Yeah. And that's the danger of always saying no, Sharon, right there. Human nature is unchangeable across every generation. So if you're a parent that always says no, expect your children not to tell you stuff, ask you stuff. They're going to do what they want, because human nature is always the same. If you punish your children for telling you the truth, guess what they're going to do? They're going to lie. That's what they're going to do. If you ask your kid a question and he tells you the truth and you punish him anyway, you are creating a liar, almost guaranteed. But if he tells you the truth and you are good with him and you don't punish him for telling you the truth severely or at all, he'll tell you the truth next time. It's human nature. And that's a general principle. So I always tried to say yes. I said yes for a more devious. I said yes every time I possibly could when I was raising my children. I know that sounds terrible. Here's why I did that. Because I knew when they got to be teenagers, or even young, there were going to be many things I was going to have to say no to. And I did this. It actually happened this way. They come to me and they say, I'm going to do such and such with such and such. And I say, nope. Oh, I said, stop right there. When have I ever told you no before? How many times have I told you no about something you really wanted? Well, I said, but this is a no, and so we're going to respect that. Because I told you yes whenever I could, because I knew this day was going to come. That's what I told them. They didn't like it anyway. But didn't work. They didn't like it. But they understood that. They recognized that I let them go places and do things, and they were surprised. So I bought them a little Atari, so I could take it away from them and say, nope, not tonight, because you didn't do what I said. Bought them the Atari, let them play with it for 2 weeks. Then one day I put the clamp down. All right. These things, though, are of no value against the indulgence. If you think making up your own rules about what you eat and what you don't eat will make you a better person and make you holy, you're wrong. It will not stop you from wanting food. It will not stop you from indulging the flesh. You'll indulge the flesh some other place or some other way. Or you'll become a glutton for asparagus or whatever it may be. Kale. It will, I know people don't believe that. They go, if I'm just strict about everything, then I'll be holy and I'll be good and it'll kill all my appetites. It won't work that way. Now, there are some rules you got to make for yourself as boundaries for yourself that that God did, but you got to make sure God didn't give those rules, but it's my rule about that. But they won't stop it from happening. I have a general rule. I know I've violated it from time to time, but it's only when necessary, and there are other things that go with it. I don't meet other women beside myself, like at the building here by myself. I don't do that. I have done it, but only rarely, and Judy knows exactly what's happening and when it's happening. And she trusts me in that matter. I don't do that. Do I have to do, is that a rule in the Bible? I don't usually meet women in restaurants for a Bible study. If I'm going to meet them somewhere, it's not going to be at the building, it's going to be at a restaurant. That's the second, because it's out in the public, and I can verify, people can verify what's going on. Is there a rule in the Bible about that? That's my rule. Would that stop me from having an affair? Not in the least. I can act like it would. But would it? Would it stop me from indulging in the desires of the flesh if I wanted to? It wouldn't. It might prevent some extra things on the sides. It protects her reputation, protects me, but it doesn't. I have to understand the limits, and yet I'm going to keep that rule. I understand the limits of it, but I'm going to keep the rule.
Well, you're following the scripture about not the appearance of evil.
Well, I don't think that scripture means that. I don't think that scripture, if we can't do anything that somebody else thinks looks wrong, then we can't do very much of anything. Avoiding the appearance of evil, now this is my understanding of it. I'm not trying to, there's another way I would put what you're saying, so let me just go to this point first. My mother would say, you can't have a mustache, this is back in the 60s, early 70s, because it's the appearance of evil. People are going to think you're bad. You can't have your hair over your ears because it's the appearance of evil. And I knew that was wrong and I didn't know a word of Greek then. So, what about Jesus going through the grain fields with his disciples picking grain on the Sabbath day? What about Jesus healing on the Sabbath day? Did that look evil to the people around him? So much so they wanted to kill him. Did he care? He didn't care, because God didn't make that rule. God didn't make the rule that it didn't violate the Old Testament as far as he was concerned. Appearance of evil means avoid evil wherever it appears. Or literally it says, most modern versions say avoid every form of evil. A form or an appearance. So wherever and in what manner evil presents itself, you avoid it. Whether it's a person, a thing, or a place, you avoid that. Not that somebody else might think it looks evil. Okay. And here's the thing, here's the trouble with that rule, Sharon. Do you think 99% of people in the world would think me eating lunch with another lady and it's not my wife, do you think they would think that was evil? Almost nobody would think that was evil in the world today. In fact, in most churches, they made fun of Mike Pence when he said that. Church people did. So nobody thinks it's evil anymore. Do you think people think I'm evil because I have a beard? Some people might. But they might in 1969 or 70 when I first tried to grow one, or I wasn't allowed to. I did. See, this is the trouble with rules. My mother said you can't have a beard. I had sideburns. You're going to have sideburns. So I grew my sideburns all the way down to here. There was a little space right there. They would come down to points right there at the end of my chin. She got upset. I said, it's not a beard. It's sideburns. Then they got to be this thick, and she said, you can't have them like that. Looks evil. I said, that's the whole point. I might have said that, but that wouldn't have been a good thing to say. But you see, when you make a rule then, when you with human beings, human nature, when you make a rule, especially a man-made rule, much less a God-given rule, what do people do? What do people like me do with that rule? We get as close as we can and sniff it. And then we step over once in a while and see what happens. Okay? That's human nature. That's why Satan asked Eve, have you seen the tree? Have you seen it? And she went and looked at it. When he pointed it out to her, she went and looked at it. The implication is, God said don't eat. She hadn't even given a second thought to that tree until Satan pointed it out to her. Human nature. So, this passage then says these kind of rules will not necessarily keep you, they won't tamp down your fleshly desires. And by flesh here, indulgence of the flesh means your desire to have your own way and do what you want to do. I'm going to keep it. I think that's the correct definition of flesh in this case, in a common way of putting it. It's the desire to do what you want to do. They won't help you with that. And we'll get to what will help you in a minute. But that's not what will help you. So here's a list of things I put up here. Dying with Christ should free us from the desire to be subject to man-made decrees. We shouldn't want to be subject to man-made ordinances when we become a Christian. We will, but we shouldn't really desire that and have human religious people heap more ordinances on top of us. Man making his own decrees is part of the basic principle of the world. Human beings making their own rules is what humans have always done. And he says Christ's going to free you from that. Subjection to human ordinances is voluntary. You can make the rules if you want. I don't have to. It's voluntary if I submit to them. You can make a rule here. We can make a rule that in order to wait on the table, you have to wear a coat and tie. Churches have made those rules. They've kept spare coats in the back to put them on before you wait on the table. I would argue if me and Gary tried to do that, you should point this verse out to us and say, your rule's fine, except I'm not going to do it because it's voluntary. Not if I don't want to. Because you can't go to the Bible and prove that's a rule from the Bible. And then you'd have a problem. Man tends to impose rules regarding earthly things. We don't make rules that really deal with the heart. Why don't we make rules that really change human hearts? Why don't we? You know, there's one simple reason. Because we can't. If people thought they could, they would. You can't make a rule that can change my heart. Think of one that you can make that would change my heart. All you can do is change my outer behavior. You can change what's on the outside here that you can see and touch and I can interact with, but you can't change my heart. Who's going to do that? Well, God's going to do that, or I'm going to do that. But you can't touch it. That's why human civilizations can have nice systems of law, but if the people don't agree with the laws, it doesn't matter. They're going to do what they want. That's where we are right now in our society. People are just going to do whatever they want. And so the laws don't change hearts. Man-imposed decrees appear to be wise, but they're not from God. They're self-imposed. You can make a rule, you can impose it on yourself, and you can impose it on others, and then they'll impose it on themselves. See, you can't even really impose a rule on others unless you can convince them to do it to themselves. You can tell me I have to wear a coat. What's the only way that's going to work is if I agree, okay, I'll wear a coat. What's that?
Or if you point a gun at them.
Well, that's force, yes, right. Then they'll agree with you then. The gun will make them agree with you. So they're not from God. They're self-imposed. And it's not real humility either. They appear to be wise, but they're self-imposed, and it's not real humility. It's actually pride that says, look at me. I don't eat vegetables. I don't eat meat. I don't eat gluten. You know, I don't get vaccinations. It's pride that lifts itself up and makes you. A lot of rules are made to make one group of people seem to be better than another group of people. The people that use the proper pronouns, they think of themselves as better than everybody who doesn't, don't they? Is there any doubt about that, just observing what you see, that the people that will use these pronouns think that they're better than those of you who don't? Of course they do. And that's part of it's false humility. And yet they act like, I'm just trying to be respectful of all human beings. I'm just trying to, blah, blah, blah. No, they're not. It's false humility. And neglect of the body is not from God, but men think it's impressive. So fasting, undue fasting, commanding fasting at certain times, not eating certain things, not wearing certain things, not doing this, or doing certain things that neglect the body, painful things that you'd have to do. These things impress men, but they don't impress God. Unless God commanded it. And then there's a reason for it. All right. Man-made decrees, here's the bottom thing in yellow on the bottom there. Man-made decrees cannot defeat the sinful desires of the flesh. Dying with Christ and living with Christ will control the flesh. That's the only thing that will control the flesh. Is dying with Christ, killing the flesh, and then living with Christ. You have to change what you want to do into what God wants you to do. You have to change your desires and put Christ's desires. It's not I that liveth, Paul says, but what? Christ that liveth in me. That's the only way you can control the flesh. You can get all the porn filters you want, but they will not stop you from a porn addiction. The only thing that will is dying with Christ. It's not easy. It's not simple. We want a simple, make a rule and it'll work. You see. And I'm not saying porn blockers aren't good. I'm just saying that they won't do everything that a person thinks they will or that they're touted to do, because they can't. No human intervention can. Only divine intervention through the Word and through a desire to change who you are and what you desire, that will change you. That will work. It's the only thing that will. Now, I have this whole thing on these words here, which I know you don't care about. I think we looked at this a little bit. This word dogmatizo is only used one time in the King James Version, or in any of them. This is it right here. Dogmatizo it's a verb. It means to be subject to ordinances. A dogma is an ordinance or decree. See that down below, dogma. And it came over into English, especially in religion. A religious dogma got brought over as decrees from the Pope or the Catholic Church into our English language, but it just means any kind of ordinance, and wasn't even about religious things initially. But to be subject to them is dogmatizo, this principle, I'm going to subject myself to these things. Now, in order to become a Roman Catholic, you have to be willing to practice dogmatizo, or being subject to ordinances. You have to be willingly subject yourselves to ordinances made by human beings, or you can't be a Roman Catholic, a faithful one anyway. And you can say that's good or that's bad. I'm just telling you that's the nature of that religion. And he's saying that's not going to ever stop it. And then you have a lot of, sometimes the really religions that are full of these ordinances, this sounds like a blanket charge, and maybe it is, but I think there's truth to it. There's truth here. Sometimes these really, really strict religions full of ordinances, what else do you see that goes along with that to some degree or another? Hypocrisy, phoniness, fakeness, because there's an attempt to I'll keep the decrees, but what about the Pharisees? You see this? They had so many rules you can't even name all the rules they had. And what were they in general? Not all of them, like Nicodemus wasn't, but what Paul wasn't. Paul says, I lived in all good conscience before God to this day as a Pharisee. But most of them were stuffed shirts, we would say. Phony. Whited sepulchres. Because the decrees almost pushed them that way. And it's used 5 times, the word dogma in the New Testament. Here's the 5. Then you have dokeo. These are some of the other words for Why do you submit yourself to these regulations? And that's to have an opinion. Basically, it just means what you think. The idea is to think. And it just means what you think. People do what they think. And today it's even worse. We do what we feel. But maybe it's the same thing. And then there's this word show, the logos. It just means they have a show of wisdom, a word of wisdom. There's words there that sound wise, but they're hollow. They don't mean anything. Then you have this word, will worship. I can't even say that word. Some of these Greek words are just crazy. Etholothreskia. I can't even say it. If I saw, and I might not even be able to say it if I saw it in Greek. This is voluntary, arbitrary worship. The worship which one prescribes and devises for himself, contrary to the contents and nature of faith which ought to be directed to Christ. I read a quote by Saint Bernard, Catholic saint. Basically says, I found out most of what I know about God by being in the woods. I'm going to paraphrase this a little. By walking in nature, I found out what I know about God. That's self-imposed religion. That's not what the Bible says about where you find out about God or what you know about God. But that was his view. And people think that's such a wonderful quote. Really? You can find out something about God in nature, like he likes to split trees in two with lightning, but anyway. And this self-imposed, look at the bottom line down there. It's said of the misdirected zeal and practice of ascetics. An ascetic is someone who punishes their flesh in order to be holy. And then this honor, it's a common word in the New Testament. Timothy, the word Timothy comes from this word. It means a person who's honored or to be respected. It's a value you place on something. It's a value or respect or honor that you give on something. That's why you pay a price. And then satisfying, plesmone, satiate, indulgence of the flesh. It doesn't really satisfy the desires of the flesh. Because, number one, human beings, you'll just want more. So you're trying to cut back on eating, and so you restrict your diet to Jell-O. Guess what you're going to really want to eat a lot of? Jell-O. Okay? Because that's what you can have. Then eventually, what's that going to do? Disintegrate and open the doors back up, right? Because it's not going to satisfy you. So your regulation that you think is so great, they restrict you to certain foods that religious way, eventually opens itself back up to everything else because it doesn't satisfy you. But if you control your appetites by having control over your whole being and put everything in its proper place and priority, you have a shot. And then the flesh, we've talked about that before. All right. So our time is gone. Well, I don't know if that's the second bell, first bell. Was it? First bell? All right, real quickly here then. And this is where the meat of what I want to get at. Maybe I have to finish it up next week or so. But there are some attempts to use decrees or dogmas to control the flesh. And there's ancient attempts. The Greeks had two branches of philosophy. Huh?
That was the second one.
What's that?
That's the second one. That's the second bell now.
That's the second bell. Okay, yes. The Stoic and Epicurean. So we'll have to talk about, those are both in the Bible, by the way. Those two groups of philosophers are in the Bible, in the book of Acts. You can look them up, but we'll have to talk about those. And then there's the Hebrews. They had their own way to control the flesh. We'll look at that. And then there's modern ways, too. So we'll talk about that next week. So hang on to this subject. It's probably a little confusing in some ways. So hang on to what we're saying here till we get finished, because we're only halfway through what I want to say about this, because I think there is something that can be gained from it. But human nature just doesn't change. And your nature is not any different than anybody else's. It may take different forms, but it's the same thing. We wish it would, but it doesn't. That's the problem. Progressivism as a political philosophy and as a religious philosophy. The problem with progressivism is that, as opposed to conservatism, there's many differences, but here's one. Conservatism basically has a foundation that human nature is of a certain characteristic, and you have to make laws and govern society and govern yourself in accordance with what you know about human nature. And so the founders of this country made a constitution that didn't give any one branch very much power. They gave very few people power of very much. Why? Because human nature says people to get power abuse it, and they hurt other people with it. So we had a government that was designed on the conservative idea that human beings will misuse power and misuse influence, and that's why our Constitution's like it is. All these other governments around the world built their constitutions on the fact that human beings are good and noble, and and you can trust the king. He's God's, he's got a God-given right to be a king, and he can rule, and you see what happened. Now, progressivism is based upon the idea that human nature is changeable and can be improved and changed over time. And the idea that human beings were getting better, evolution came along in the 1800s, and the idea caught on in intellectual circles that human beings were getting better and better all the time. And so you could make your government and social principles on the idea that human beings could create a utopia. That if you just let human beings go, they will create a utopia and everything will be perfect. And that's why progressivism fails and hurts people, because it doesn't correspond to the truth about human nature. Now, conservatism in the wrong way has its own faults, don't get me wrong. But that's the fundamental difference between the two political and religious philosophies. Religious progressives think that human beings are capable on their own of finding God and doing all these good things. What's the Bible say? It's not in man that walks to direct his own steps. You need to listen to what the prophet said. You can't make up your own way. You can't make up your own religion. You have to look at what those. That's conservative kind of thinking. Progressive thinking says you can make it all up yourself and it'll all be good. All right. Does that make any sense? All right. Enough. So I had to get into something political, didn't I? Well, I'll probably talk about 10 political things later. Now that's the reason that I am both a religious and political conservative. Not just so I can conserve everything in the past. That's not what I mean by that. I mean a biblical literalist because it reflects the truth about God and human nature. And our laws need to reflect that. And so, you can say, well, capital punishment, it's not really a deterrent. God says you put this person to death to put away evil from among yourselves, and so that all Israel may fear. That's exactly what God says about capital punishment. You do it so that all Israel may fear. Does that sound like a deterrent to you? And I say this is terrible. If you got a guy who is not afraid of being put to death, maybe he should be put to death. He's the very one you should be concerned about. The guy that says, I don't care if I shoot this person. I don't care if they put me to death. He is dangerous. You need to take that person off the streets if he doesn't want to lose his own life. Does that make any sense? Or is that's why I would only say that because human nature, to say that people don't really care if they live or die, that's against human nature. That's not true of 99.9% of the people. All right, 368, was that the number? Whew. I don't know where my phone is, but I can tell you the number right tonight, Steve. Had to use the Find My Phone feature, and it was somewhere here in the building. What else? I forgot something else today, 2 or 3 things today. We had a little discussion about me not being able to find things according to her directions. She gave me some directions into the next room to find some paper towels. We had just had a discussion about headship and subjection, too, in a very positive way. And then I told her when she came in, and when she gave me what I thought were incomplete instructions about how to find the paper towels. All right, so you go, here's the room. Here's the room. It's used to be my office, now it's a pantry. I'm in the kitchen. Where are the paper towels? Where do you keep them now? She goes, well, you go into the office, and then over there on the left, you'll see them. In the corner in the left. So I walked into the office, about halfway in, and I'm looking at the far corner of the left, and there is nothing like a paper towel over there. I said, honey, I need more instruction. It's in the office on the left. Well, what she meant was, walk to the door of the office right there on the left. As soon as you get in. And I was in the office. I went into the office. I started to use the baptism analogy about going into Christ, when you're buried, but I didn't. So when we got done with all of that, after discussing subjection, and we're talking about somebody else writing about this subject, which we agree on that subject. Anyway, I said, well, since I'm the head, I give you a decree, an order, that you must give very specific directions from now on. That's your order from the head. I've got to have better instructions. Does that sound fair? She said, okay.
You put the groceries away, didn't even know where they were.
That's not my job to put groceries away, unless she tells me to. That used to be somewhere different. And we just moved above. Now, they used to be underneath the kitchen sink. And we just moved everything out from there last night. And that's why I asked you, because I knew we just moved everything out. I don't remember moving those out. I'm thinking, well, maybe they got put someplace else. And they did. Probably 2 years ago. 5 years ago. I don't know. All I know is paper towels magically appear on the... If I got to know everything myself, Sharon, why do I need her? If the answer is, Mike, you should know all this stuff yourself, I'm saying, okay, I can do that. So why do I need her? She just made herself superfluous. You say you don't need Judy? That's not what I said at all. Not even close to what I said.
Paper towels won't keep you warm at night.
What's that?
Paper towels won't keep you warm at night.
I didn't say I didn't need Judy. I said if I have to know everything, I don't need Judy. Do I have to know everything? No, that's why I have a wife, because I don't need to know everything now. She don't have to do everything either. I got up underneath the sink and did all kind of stuff last night, laying on my back upside down with a headlight on. Did I ask her to do that? Nope. What else did I do that I wouldn't let you do today because I didn't think it would smell very good? And I didn't want her to have to smell a bad smell. Anyway, all right, she's shaking her head saying, move on. 368. We're going to sing this song as we close our service. We appreciate everybody being here. I'm sorry if I drug it out too long, but we're going to sing this song now to encourage you. If we can pray with you, help you in some way, your brothers and sisters would love to help you. And if we can baptize you into Christ tonight, it would be a wonderful thing that we would all be thankful for. So if we can help you this evening, come to the front here. Let's stand and sing.
I hear the Savior say, thy strength indeed is small. Child of weakness, watch and pray. Find in me thine all in all. Jesus paid it all.
All to him I owe.
Sin had left
The crimson
stain. He washed it white as snow. Lord, now indeed I find thy power and thine alone.
and change the leper's spots and melt the heart of stone. Jesus paid it all to him I owe. Sin had left a crimson stain. He washed it white as snow.
And when before the throne I stand
And in him complete,
I'll lay my trophies down,
all down at Jesus' feet. Jesus paid it all to him I owe. Sin had left a crimson stain. He washed it white as snow. I shouldn't have made it sound like we had some kind of a disagreement today, because we did not have a disagreement at all. It was mostly funny. And I'm presenting it as if it was disagreement, and I think she would say, anyway. And we're just very different. So I think as a man, for example, I don't even see messes. I don't see the mess. I get used to seeing it there, a stack of papers, a pile of stuff, or something else. I don't even notice it. Now then she points it out to me and says, I need that fixed. Then I don't mind doing that, but to expect me to always notice that stuff, you're going against my nature, my human nature. I'm not going to see that. I'm going to see something else that needs to be done, and that's why we need each other. So anyway, we didn't have an argument at all. And if we had, I would tell you, but we didn't. Anything else? I did mention Paulette Udetzi's son. Oh, what was his name? I can't think of his name. Cooper or something like that, out in California. I sent it out on Savona groups yesterday. What's that? Ezra. Thank you, Ezra. He was injured badly in a motorcycle accident. I don't think it's life-threatening at this point, but he's going to be in the hospital for a long time. And I think we posted his post. I don't have a contact for him yet from her, so we'll post that. Another thing, let's remember the New Life class tomorrow night at 7 o'clock here at the building and on Zoom. And Sunday there is a potluck and a wedding shower for Mike and his fiancee Joe at our home right after services. It's on Sunday. All of you should come if you can. And because of that, I think it's I already put it out there, I think we need to cancel the Sunday night meeting at Bob Evans. It's just too many things. Okay, I don't even know if we can get done with everything and get over there by 5 o'clock. Who knows? So we'll just postpone that, and I'll try to get the word to everybody who might otherwise come, because I don't see like Bob Allen, he's usually there. Anyway, we're going to postpone that meeting. Anything else? All right, let's have a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we're very grateful tonight we've been able to be together, and bless us in these efforts to understand your word and to compare them to our lives and learn things that can help us improve our character, our desire to serve you, Father, and be better servants of yours. Bless all these young people here tonight. Bless them with a long life of service, and give them a desire and a willingness to serve you all the days of their life. We pray for each family here, that you might protect us as we go about our business this week until the Lord's Day. Bring us back together again in love on the first day of the week. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.